Good morning. We're continuing on with our stories from Tripping Over the Lunch Lady. Today's story is by David Lubar. It is a little bit of a longer one, so if I have to break this up into two places, that's what we'll do. This is science friction. Oxygen met hydrogen. Fa-boom! 27 kids jumped out of their seats like they'd been jabbed with forks. Not me. I saw it coming. There was Miss Adler, wearing safety goggles and a goofy grin, holding a pair of test tubes mouth to mouth. Any science geek would know what to expect. I spotted it before class, while everyone else in the room was chattering and fooling around. The tubes had been sitting in a small tank of water. A wire ran from a battery terminal into each tube. Break up water with electricity, you get hydrogen and oxygen. Slowly. Put the gases back together, you get water again. Quickly. And a bit of a bang, energy has to go somewhere. I loved Miss Adler's class. I want to be just like her when I grow up. Do I have your attention? She asked. I understood the need for loud displays. It was our first day back from spring vacation. Everyone was probably still cranked on chocolate bunny ears and marshmallow eggs. As I said, energy has to go somewhere. It's project time, Miss Adler said. I'm going to divide you by random into groups of 4. Speaking of which, who can define random? I know, Benji Halber shouted from his seat in the back row. There were 2 squirrels in my driveway, but then my dad ran them over. Most of the other girls in the class and a bunch of the boys went, ew, not me. Scientists need to remain calm and detached, even when faced with the thought of splattered squirrels. Miss Adler sighed, but she didn't quite manage to hide her smile as she scanned the raised hands. She called on Ellen Stover, who stood up, grinned, straightened her skirt, and said, Random means you don't know what it will be. Sort of, Miss Adler said, but I think we can get a bit more precise. Even if you don't know what a present will be before you unwrap it, that doesn't mean it's random. I got this for my birthday, Ellen said, holding out her left hand so we could all admire the extremely ugly ruby ring that clung to her pinky like a swollen zit. It was a surprise. Sheesh, it wasn't enough for her that she was pretty and smart and rich. She had to make sure everyone knew all the details of her life. Very nice, Ellen, Miss Adler said. She called on several other kids, then finally pointed at me. Amanda. Each member of the group has the same chance of being selected, I said. Miss Adler nodded. Exactly. So with that in mind, write your name on a piece of paper. I flipped through my notebook and hunted for a blank page. I found one in the back. Then I hunted for a pen. I finally found one inside my eyeglass case. Miss Adler collected our sheets in a box. Now, I'm going to randomly pick groups of 4. Benji stood up, swung an imaginary golf club, and shouted, 4! Ellen asked, Can't we pick our own groups? Personally, I wish we'd be put in groups of 1. I do my best work on my own, but if I had to be in a group, I'd rather not leave the details to chance. Some of the kids just weren't serious about getting good grades. I'll tell you what, Miss Adler said. Let's make an exercise out of it. I understand you want to work with your friends. We're comfortable with familiar things. But comfort doesn't always lead to surprising discoveries. So, what are the odds, if you select randomly, that you'll get the group you want? The first student who gives me the right answer can pick his or her own group. Excellent. I'm not just a science geek, I'm also a math geek. I eat problems like that for lunch. Well, that and turkey sandwiches on whole wheat bread. I glanced around the room to see how the competition was doing. Most of the kids were staring at their calculators as if the keys were marked in Martian. A couple were actually punching in numbers. Randomly, I hoped. And, off to one side, George Mastiff was staring at the wall. He was new, he was big, and he was silent. He kind of spooked me. I didn't think he'd talk in class even once since he'd arrived here last month. The odds keep coming out even, Benji shouted. I hunted down my calculator, which had somehow wandered from my backpack to my purse, solved the problem, and gave Miss Adler the answer right before Ellen raised her hand. Miss Adler nodded. It looks like you get to pick your group. She shuffled through the box and removed my name. Great. I looked around the room and realized I'd never actually worked with any of the others, but I saw a couple of kids I figured I could get along with. I'll take... Not so fast. I said you could pick your group. Miss Adler shook the box. Come on up and pick. Wait. I wanted to argue, but all year long, Miss Adler had hammered us over the head with one concept. Science requires precision and attention to the smallest detail. You couldn't be sloppy. You couldn't make assumptions. I'd just done that, and she'd gotten me. But heck, I was a good sport, and I wanted to be a good scientist, so I went up and reached into the box. I figured I still had a decent shot at getting a group that'd be willing to work hard for a high grade. I put out the first sheet. Oh no. No. Benji, the Joker himself. He was so hyper, he didn't get sent to the office anymore because even the principal refused to listen to him for more than 10 seconds. I started to jam the sheet back in the box. Miss Adler cleared her throat loudly. I handed her the paper, then pulled out the second name. No. Ellen, Miss Perfect, the only girl in the school who had different colored pens to match each of her outfits. And then the third, George. Of course, a boy who had less to say than Benji's squirrels. What were the odds of that? I felt like I'd won the lottery and then discovered that the prize wasn't $1 million. It was 1,000,000 dead fish. I returned to my seat and listened numbly as Miss Adler explained the details. You can choose any scientific field you want. The project must represent the combined work of all members. It will be due in 7 weeks and count as half your grade for the marking period. You have to work on this on your own time, but I'll give you a couple of minutes in class to get organized. I stood up and looked around. Unlike oxygen and hydrogen, some things didn't combine very easily. For example, argon, neon, and the other inert gases. Or the four of us. Ellen and George didn't move. Ellen obviously wanted everyone to come to her. George didn't seem to care who went where, so I walked over to his desk. So did Benji. Ellen had no choice except to join us. Hey, Benji said, spreading his arms wide. Group hug? Ellen and I both went, ew. Some things were too gross even for calm, detached scientists. Just kidding, Benji said. Knock it off, I said. We need to get organized. Who said you were in charge? Ellen asked. I'm good at science, I said. So am I, Ellen said. And I'm organized. She held up her notebook, which was disgustingly neat. My notebook looked like the wrapper of an exploded firecracker, which didn't mean I wasn't a good scientist. I'd just been too busy to straighten it out, though I'm sure I could never get Ellen to believe that I knew what I was doing. I tried to think of a scientific approach to picking a leader. Meanwhile, George reached into his pocket and pulled out a quarter. He flipped it onto the back of his left hand, covered it with his right hand, and looked at Ellen. That's no way to pick, she said. He looked at me. Heads, I said. Heads it was. So when shall we meet, I asked. Turned out that they had stuff going on all week except for today, right after school. 3 coin tosses and a short argument later, we agreed to meet at my place. My room's a little messy, I warned everyone. Messy room, messy mind, Ellen said. Empty room, empty head, Benji said. Much as I hated to admit it, I was starting to like him. We met outside after school and walked to my house. On the way, Ellen mentioned 37 reasons why she was so great and wonderful and perfect. Benji made 19 jokes, and George kicked a rock. When we went inside, my mom got all excited. Oh, you brought friends, Amanda. How nice. I'll make snacks. She seemed to think I spent too much time by myself. Watch your step, I warned everyone as we approached my room. I pushed against the door. It didn't move. I leaned into it and gave a hard shove. Ew, you want us to go in there? Ellen scrunched up her face like she'd been invited to enter the wrong end of a sewer pipe. Hey, it's not dirty, it's just messy. I walked over various piles of clothes, books, magazines, and other essentials, then plopped down on my bed. Okay, actually, I plopped down on the clothes that were on my bed. Ellen tiptoed in, followed by Benji and George. George sat on my hamper. Ellen perched on the edge of a chair. You should fire your maid, she said. Ours would never leave a room like this. I ignored her. Wow, it's sort of like you live inside a laundry basket. Benji walked over to the highest mound of clothes, right near my bookcase, and reached up. Hey, I can touch the ceiling. He thumped his chest and shouted, I'm king of the crap pile. Cut that out, I said. We have work to do. Knock, knock. My mom appeared with a tray stacked full of goodies. Before anyone could speak, she'd handed each of us a plate. Turkey sandwiches, baby carrots with little dishes of ranch dip. Mom made great sandwiches. Okay, back to the project, I said. What about chemistry? Boring, Benji said. George nodded. I took a bite of my sandwich. I really loved chemistry, but I was willing to compromise. Biology? I asked. Not interesting, Benji said. George curled his lip. I took another bite and tried another field. After getting similar responses from them for everything I could think of, I looked over at Ellen, who had been sitting quietly eating her snack. Even there, she was disgustingly neat. I didn't see a crumb on her plate. She'd finished her sandwich and started on the carrot sticks. You like chemistry? I asked her. Astronomy, she said, dabbing a speck of mayonnaise from the corner of her lip with her napkin. That figured. I bet if I'd mentioned astronomy, she'd say she liked chemistry. We kept talking, but got absolutely nowhere. Ellen didn't like any of my ideas. I didn't like any of hers. Benji seemed more interested in touching the ceiling and waiting for someone to mention astronomy again so he could make gross jokes about the seventh planet from the sun. And George just sat there. Though compared to the noise everyone else was making, I had to admit I was beginning to appreciate the value of silence. We only had an hour because Ellen needed to leave for a piano lesson. When it was time to go, we agreed that everyone would think about stuff for a week. Then we'd get back together. Nice friends, my mom said after they'd left. Wouldn't you like to have a neat and tidy room where all of you could hang out? It's fine the way it is, I said. I'd rather spend my time trying to understand the universe than straightening out one little unimportant part of it. So I'm going to stop here and we'll pick up in a second video.